Okay, so we're going to start the webinar now. I'm Sachin Magwani from Dada. I'm joined by Russell and Timothy. The webinar this time round is going to be on bringing AI, artificial intelligence, to transform in-house recruitment. These are things such as leave request and expense approval to integrating HR workflows. Um, When we go through the presentation, please be mindful that the reason why we picked HR was just because it's the generic process which is common to all organizations. Many of the things which you do see in terms of the AI tool sets can be used for uh, different functions, whether it be finance, health and safety teams, environmental teams. Um, to contract administration in terms of NEC and FIT contracts. Um, so the reason for picking HR is because everybody understands HR processes to some degree because they've been an employee or manager in an organization. Um, but just be mindful that many of the things which we're going to show are transferable to other functions. So if we then go on to the presentation and then the webinar material, what we're trying to do is connecting people, content, and data systems together. You will be getting from the webinar an understanding of how to automate your recruiting process, from getting a job requisition approved to employee onboarding and accepting an offer. To on-site orientation. So if you think about bringing an employee on, getting their site access, the IT logins, etc., to normal monthly processes such as leave request and expense approval. Um, and what we'll also be showing is how some of the new tool sets on the market uh, mean that you have a single entry of data, and so it's not cutting and pasting between systems. It reduces the paper burden on HR, and then it allows you to leverage your existing systems. So it's not um, having to invest in a new technology architecture. You can use your existing HR systems and existing financial systems. The benefits for all of this is that you hire the right candidates um, more quickly and then get them to work more uh, efficiently on your projects so they start delivering value from day one. One of the other things which we'll be showing as part of the webinar is components of the successful change management go live. So we are sharing with you transition guidelines that we've used on real projects for you to then, have a go on your own and then be able to have the similar success. So the reason for these new tool sets is to be able to minimize the time that HR spends on data processing. So some of the analysis that we've done um, shows that 50% of HR time is spent on processing employee information, um, and that 40% of the time is spent on administrative work. So re-entering data into multiple systems or cutting and pasting data from um, uh, you know, from one form to the other, and just more operational tasks rather than strategic tasks. So if you can have a look at the diagram and see anything which seems familiar to you, then and your processes, then there is opportunity to automate them. So, for example, do you have many manual workarounds? Are you reliant on key staff? And does things seem to fall over during the holiday period because they're not there to perform manual interventions? Is there a lot of ad hoc tasks? Um, um, and is it unclear how things can get approved, um, or where the bottlenecks are within the system? These are the types of things that can be automated, and you can then benefit from the process optimization that follows. One of the things which we'll also need to explain is how AI differs from machine learning and deep learning. So artificial intelligence is more about performing single tasks, and uh, whereas machine learning is um, more going into the area of big data analytics, where the use of AI then focuses on learning from experience, and where multiple tasks are then performed autonomously, where essentially the AI surpasses human abilities. We're going to focus on the single task data processes um, as the first step. So why improve HR? Key thing is to reduce the amount of paperwork and reduce the administrative costs. It has additional benefits such as ensuring compliance and improving data accuracy. And then because of all of the data being digitized in an essential, accessible format, it mitigates risk. So what kind of work is a good candidate for automation? Key thing is it high volume, repetitive, and manual? Um, if it is the case that it is high volume and it is repetitive and manual, then um, you're, it's a good indicator that you get value from automating it. If it is rule-based and uh, has to be used in multiple legacy systems, then what we can then do within the workflow automation is automate those steps and those rules, and then integrate them with your multiple legacy systems. So it reduces the amount of cutting and pasting between documents, between systems as well. And then it allows you to enter data once and for that to be integrated with your multiple systems. What also can benefit from is from process automation and optimization. So what HR elements can be automated? Things such as leave requests, um, performance reviews, uh, quarterly goal setting, onboarding and offboarding. When it comes to things such as human resource information systems and dynamic document generation, with respect to HRIS, we're talking about things such as updating the annual holiday allowance for employees or updating their personal data. In terms of dynamic document generation, things such as, for example, creating an offer for a candidate, and then creating an employee contract. Or when it comes to onboarding, offboarding staff, when an employee comes to a particular site, it will have their health and safety particulars for that site, and similarly things such as the expense policy for that particular site, um, and so on. So when it comes to automating the recruiting process, you can see that there's many ad hoc tasks which currently HR have to do, from getting a job requisition approved. Um, that can involve multiple process steps and reiterations. scheduling an interview, and updating people's meeting calendar, uh, collating that type of uh, review from that session, hiring the candidate, and then updating your HR and payroll database with the new candidate's details. When it comes to employee onboarding, um, we look more into that in detail. You can see that there's many different uh, steps within that, things such as scheduling an orientation session uh, for health and safety, uh, uh, then also things such as employee provisioning, making sure that they have the right logins, allocating the software licenses into them, telling IT to provide them a laptop or a desktop, um, to adding them onto the HR systems, things such as putting their personal details, bank details, etc. When it comes to performance reviews, um, similarly, you have the scheduling a meeting, updating people's calendars, updating the HR records. But then you have also other things such as connecting to external systems, um, and then providing 360 feedback from peers. So there's quite a lot of areas within that. How we believe AI can help is that HR is currently in most organizations a very paper-heavy function, um, with most work being done on still on physical paper, with a poor lack of centralized data, which prevents many organizations from doing uh, business analytics uh, on their data. Um, there's a lot of cutting and pasting and rekeying data into multiple forms and systems. There is an opportunity to streamline the hiring process, essentially increasing the likelihood of success of an individual being able to add value sooner to the organization, making sure that they're a successful uh, uh, employee, because the cost of employee failure, for example, a person being hired, not fitting in or not feeling comfortable in an organization, then leaving, is that there's a huge cost to that. Um, and then making sure that uh, you know all the necessary documentation is updated and processes are followed. Some of the solutions which we'll show in this webinar are things such as Nintex, which allow dynamic data content that allows you to create personalized fields. So, for example, if you have Office 365, you'll be then able to integrate your SharePoint workflow automation toolsets to Office 365, so that by putting an employee's name in, you'll be able to then workflow form to the correct line manager, um, or the appropriate kind of HR uh, uh, team. The benefits which you should be able to expect from this AI usage is self-service. Employees and managers will be able to perform actions themselves without the manual intervention of HR. This digital transformation brings with it business intelligence and analysis. You then have the data in SharePoint libraries, which allow for data mining. Um, it will drive learning and development because people have more transparency as to how to um, book training courses or what the approvals are. Um, so it removes the barrier of entry for them to be able to do this on themselves. That in turn drives employee engagement and improves their efficiency and productivity. Essentially, what we're talking about is moving HR from an operational to strategic um, uh, space within an organization, so they're actually business partners rather than a support function to project managers. What we mean by that is basically things such as uh, predicting the FTE requirements for the next 1 year or 2 years, or being able to reduce headcount in certain areas through the better business processes. Um, uh, the other part, which we haven't talked about, is that all of this um, has an additional benefit of employee retention, which ultimately reduces the cost of HR in terms of hiring new candidates and doing that knowledge transfer. So how do you start? One of the things which we use within Dada is P3M3. So it's an Lexus consulting partner. We use P3M3 to drive our systems design and implementation. This covers uh, essentially process audits across a range of work streams such as financial management, stakeholder management, uh, organizational governance, and resource management at different levels of the organization. So, for example, at the portfolio, program management, and project management. Within the different work function areas, we have three key steps. One is process management, process automation, and then process optimization. So process management is mapping your processes, sharing those processes within your organization so everybody understands what currently people do and agree that's how people actually operate within the organization. Because there's no point automating something before you know currently how an organization does something and everybody agrees that's the right way of doing it. Um, then with respect to process automation, creating digital forms and mobile apps and e-signatures um, and connected capabilities. What is that? Basically, you would have a form within HR or within your project management function. Take something as simple as a leave request, which we'll see, or something else such as a site inspection. To digitize it so that it's available on a tablet or a mobile app, allow people to remotely fill these things in, and then having the workflows designed um, in order that the form gets approved and reviewed by the relevant person, and that the e-signatures are available so that they don't have to print and scan things over. They're able to just like sign on their mobile or tablet, and then the forms are then workflowed, and then connectors then are used to update the relevant HR or document management systems. Process optimization is that by having everything digitized, you're then able to then see where the bottlenecks are within an organization's processes. So, for example, with respect to purchase order approval or job requisition approval, uh, where is things breaking down so that a critical staff or critical procurement need is not getting fulfilled? Who's not approving the job requisition uh, or the purchase requisition? Um, then in terms of, for example, IT, where are things falling down in terms of service level agreements? Exploring the P3M3, so you will be able then, via these type of audits, to identify the key processes, issues which are affecting your organization. So, for example, whether it be resource forecasting, uh, or capacity planning, and then you'll be able to say this is the area within terms of resource management, but they're not really um, um, fulfilling a critical business need. So that can drive process improvements. The questionnaire which you see on the screen is available on our website. Um, Now, one of the things which we'll be showing as part of this webinar is the Nintex workflow platform. So when we've talked about things such as workflow, forms, mobile connectors, and analytics, we'll be using a Nintex workflow platform, which has like a all-in-one solution. The other reason why we're using that for the purposes of this webinar is because we are technology partners with them. But what you will be able to do is with alternative products uh, achieve the same benefits, whether it be with Python or, or Microsoft Flow. So there are various SharePoint workflow designer and big data BI toolsets out there. But for the purposes of this webinar, we needed to use our existing tenancy. So this is an example of a form and how you can digitize it. So over here you have a canvas. You're then able, then with minimal coding, be able to drop and drag uh, fields where the geolocation. So, for example, being able to say if it was a site inspection, um, where you are, and then having things such as date, time, or images. This is a blank form, but what we'll be showing is how you can use the same canvas to put in things such as your company logos. The fields once dragged and dropped can be then moved around the form in order then to optimize the look and feel. Um, and then one of the other things which you're then able to do um, is also create like list lookups. So for example, you'll have a SharePoint form, which you're then able to then link fields to your SharePoint list. So in the example which you have in the screen, a person's creating a purchase order. Uh, what they're trying to do over here is then link it to a SharePoint list which has all of the approved products for that organization. Similarly, you can use one for your resource library or your role library. When we talked about workflow, what we're showing on the screen here is how you can quickly develop workflow. Similarly with drag and drop um, uh, functionality. So this shows how you can create approval processes for assigning a flexi task, and how with connectors you can then publish this flexi task onto Yammer. This is another quick and dirty example which we prepared for showing the SharePoint workflow. So over here you have you're then able to create different approval steps, integrate that with, for example, your Outlook email, and have different workflows for different approval. One of the other things which you're then able to do is create validation for certain fields so that things aren't submitted which then have to be revised. In this quick example which we've shown, you're then able to validate fields such as email to make sure that they're formatted correctly. Otherwise, you cannot submit the form. So now that you've seen quick and dirty examples of what we mean by forms, workflow, etc., we'll now be talking briefly as to finding the correct candidates for electronic forms. So in an organization, you have many HR processes, you have many HR forms. You then need to kind of prioritize which are the key forms, which are the key processes to automate. So to identify candidates, we've identified some key criteria, things such as assessing the level of complexity and customization which is within that form. Um, so for example, does it need to have your company branding or joint venture branding? What is how many people use that form? Um, is it critical to the business need? Um, if, for example, you digitize this particular form, are there many common components to this form which can be repeated across many different forms? So by automating one form, are you essentially giving yourself a head start to other forms? In terms of transition planning checklist, um, we've identified some key checks, things such as multiple views. So if you're an employee within an organization, does it have to have a certain view to you, but a different view to an external person receiving that same form, um, because there could be company sensitive material. If that form is going to be accessed in different formats, whether it be tablet, desktop, mobile, how will it look in those different formats? And you can customize how a form will look on a mobile phone versus a desktop browser. Um, Key things such as the access of that data. Will there be integration between a form with other SharePoint library lists? We saw an example of a purchase order form accessing a SharePoint list for products. Um, and then things such as rules and validation. We saw the example earlier about validation of certain fields. So we don't want to go through each and every one of these, but they're quite self-explanatory. Things such as confirmation messages, cancellation cancellation messages. So it's useful to have a think of what type of branding cancellation messages that you'd want to have within your form. One of the things which we also wanted to explain was that a lot of what we're showing here can be uh, repeated for other functions. Um, we've shown you earlier how you have a blank uh, form, like a blank canvas, and you'll see that it had that in-text logo. We've done some examples on the screen on how you can replace that default logo with your own logo. So these are some things which we've developed in the house for our own purposes. Some things such as vehicle inspection forms, incident reporting forms, and you can then see how you can customize the form and the layout for different assessment criteria. Another example which we use in-house, things such as site inspection forms and incident report forms, where you have different fields such as yes, no, you'll have date and time, you'll be able to have a list lookup, and then you'll be able to add attachments. So for example, if you did a site inspection, or like there was an incident, you'd then be able to take a picture and then attach that picture to your form and then submit that for review. So in terms of transition guidelines, the useful thing is to review your existing processes before you automate it. So make sure that it's optimized. So streamlining and improving your forms before you try to automate anything is a good idea. Cleaning up data. So if you have a SharePoint list, to make sure you don't have many different entries of the same thing. So you don't so that when people use the list lookup function, they're not confused as to whether they should pick one uh, uh, item or another. Um, Simplicity, making sure that the forms are very simple design, and that helps to improve the end user experience. And then also um, thinking of things such as how the forms are going to be filled in. So whether you're going to be done in mobile phones or tablets, will you be out and about? Um, because that helps with the terms with the testing. Um, the one thing which we haven't mentioned is that many of these forms can be filled in offline. So if you're working remotely and there's not a good mobile phone signal um, or Wi-Fi, you're then able to then fill these forms offline and then submit them for processing once you're back with a to place with a good mobile phone signal. Um, so one of the things which we'll be showing now is a recording of um, of uh, how you can automate leave requests with Nintex. This will show you things such as enabling lazy approval, so that when a manager gets, for example, a form, they don't necessarily need to log on to an application to kind of uh, such as Sharepoint to approve it by just ticking something within an email. Manager approves it, and then it's integrated so that it updates people's Outlook calendar and different HR systems. So I'll be now handing over to Timothy, who is going to be walking you through the Sharepoint demonstration. So just bear with me.
I want to show a demonstration this morning of an HR example where you have a vacation request or time off request. And this is simply just an example of how you can take workflow in a business process and automate it with a combination of Sharepoint and the Nintex user interface. So in today's example, we're just going to show you the end user experience first, then show you the workflow actually. So we're looking at a page with the list here. And then I'm going to write the calendar to show all of the approved items that are out there. So from an end user's perspective, what they're going to do is go out and fill out a form to create a request, kick off the process. So as an end user, I'm going to request a day off, request a week, now that's our request to start on the 19th. And I'm going to finish on the 26th. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. What's going to happen is I hit save, the new request is created. The workflow is installed. See here that your sixth was received. And the notification could come via here. This is how the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go over to supervisors. And we're going to open this up with email stating that an individual was requesting time off. And the thing to note here is that this form or the email that has been received is very much tailored to the request. So you'll see here that the email is requested typically starting from 19 for 48 hours and HR reporting 80 hours. So the law says every day he or she Our boss's computer. first one apply. Majority of that, not also, they have reminders right there as well, so that if the supervisor doesn't respond within 4 reminders, every 4 hours, on their business hours. And okay, sure. I'm going to get a class with you get other items show up here as far as track. Now, it's rejected. I'm sorry. It is approved. We'll add it to the calendar install. Go back into our system and pull out the hours. And all of those. So you can see how in this situation, it's literally just drag and drop in order to get your report here. Now, the next thing I'm going to do very quickly is show this other action. There's an action that you all see on this version. You can also create a custom action, which is what we see. Get balance, update the balance, update the user. But there are a lot of other ones out here to make we call it service, SQL command, query, all of these kind of integration points. These will be out of the box on the left-hand side. With the ODAP, XML, project server, all integration. Along with the nature of functionality, chat, another word out with PDF, and situation or issue press release. That press release is going to approval process. You can create lists, delete items, check items, and check items. Even go into a Word document and update a Word document. Think about legal process. Contracts, legal document, not sure. You can input information in that document, template, and then it can be emailed to you. Update items, set field values. So as you're going through a process, you want to change the value. Do progress, take changes, load, package, set, field value. Also, a lot of document workflows. So we have filters, you can run loops, run tests, parallel action. So like all the process reporting, like HR has to have one route, IT has to have another route, they can all do their thing with that parallel action. Also, that condition, and then it's more complicated more of it's what's called change state. Essentially, you may have a workflow where maybe through the start process, it's rejected, you have to do another process, or maybe upon condition of all of a sudden it was a certain section of workflow. So you can, based upon inputs, you can direct workflow in different directions with this change state, stating, or changing the state of each of those machines, which is really easy. Then take a lot of there's a lot of operations as well. We can do map operations, log history, call the workload for a period of time, call the details of the task, specific data, and as well as far as a terminated workload. Also, the enterprise version of Index, you can also add users into Active Directory, create Active Directory users, sites, decommission users, all kinds of stuff that you can do in here, even delete sites as well. And as far as the user interface is concerned here, in these actions, you can create Outlook appointments, tasks in Outlook. You can even go get meeting suggested times as well. So a lot of actions that you have over here on the left-hand side. And again, anything that you don't see, you can create or have your IT group create some custom actions. The other thing is you have Nintex Live as well. And in Nintex Live, you have this catalog of items that are out here that you can use to connect external services within your environment. So you'll see in here, you can connect to Amazon, Bing, Box, the query files, DocuSign for digital signatures, if you need to get the signature on a particular document, Dynamics CRM online, Exchange Server, MailChimp, A lot of other services that are in here as well. Microsoft Azure to create virtual machines, Office 365 environments, Salesforce, and Salesforce Chatter, in addition to SharePoint Online. Even Twitter, you need to tweet on behalf of the organization. You can have the approval process set up in Yammer as well. So a lot of external things that you can connect to. The last thing I want to show you is Nintex forms as well. So we're going to come back to the list, and I'll give you a quick reminder of the form that we saw just a second ago that's right out of the box. Kind of plain vanilla form that's right here. If I cancel out of that and go into the ribbon interface, right beside the info path button, you'll find a Nintex forms button. And this will automatically create a Nintex form and allow you to come in and configure this form to meet what your organization is trying to do, or you're trying to do this particular form. Now, in your situation, you can ignore the Nintex forms logo, put your organization's logo out there, and then you can start to move around all these fields and build out your particular form. So in this example, maybe I want to move all these down onto one line. So I'll move the end date and start date down here on the same line. Really configure this form to look the way that we want to. I'll move start date down as well and associated field here. And as we shrink these items down, I'm now making room for more stuff to go above it. Or maybe we want to put some introductory text right here. So a lot of things we can do form-wise. You can even drag and drop order, geolocation, labels, all that fun stuff. We can drag and drop on the left-hand side and the right-hand side. We can look up items in the SharePoint list here, attach, and all these other things just come right in. And then we can even put rules in place as well. So if we wanted to have a rule that says, when I request sick leave, I want the end date to disappear, you can simply come in here and add rule, do the formatting, associate this rule to that particular field right here, and then say that I want to hide that when that happens. So that when you select sick leave, the end date ends because I don't necessarily know that. So very, very easy to kind of configure those right here in the interface. Furthermore, one of the other things you can get into is every time you select each of these items, you get this tab that allows you to configure that particular selection. But the other thing is that you can also target mobile devices. So I'm going to select smartphone as a targeted device, and now you'll see the view for smartphones. So we can do Nintex mobile phone, mobile tablet, or even get into other specific devices. Target that versus so very, very much a configurable interface right here. Go back to desktop. And the other thing you can do as well with Nintex forms is live settings. You can even take this form and publish it to anonymous users. So those outside your organization you can access, but submit a form into your intranet. So a lot more things that we can show in the workflow and forms here, but this is just kind of a general overview of the forms and workflow tool. Thanks.
So thanks to Tim for giving us a deep dive and general overview of the tool sets. You can see case studies within our website of people who use Nintex workflow and the benefits that they derive from that. In terms of wrapping up this webinar, we just would like to just provide a brief overview as to who we are and what we provide. So what Dada provides is consultancy as a subscription. So we try to fill the gap between agency staff and expensive consultancies by providing consultancy as a subscription service. So rather than a purchase order for a named individual, we provide you a surface order, things such as implementing project control tool sets, um, uh, to major projects delivery, to workflow automation, because many of these systems or solutions require a variety of resources and skill sets. And so rather than you as a client kind of having to be a master of all trades in terms of managing that variety of labor, we provide that account management, we provide that flexible resource base, we provide the tool sets, etc. So um, not only would we provide a SharePoint designer, but we provide essentially the tool sets for that SharePoint designer that would need. So you don't need to necessarily procure all the software, but you would have to provide the tenancy. Um, and then what we do that uh, via a subscription package. So rather than um, locking you into a contract on a monthly basis. You you subscribe, and that if we didn't deliver, then you could end your subscription with no penalty. So thank you for joining the webinar. We are able to kind of repeat the demonstration in the webinar on an individual basis if you want to deep dive anything discussed in particular to your organization. Thank you once again. Please visit us at www.big-data.co.uk for free templates and toolsets and to learn more about our organization. Thank you once again.